there's CBS, it's that time of year of lists, right? It's just, there are football lists everywhere, and I'm admittedly somewhat addicted to football lists, but they make for good conversation. CBS Sports has put out, I guess they do it every year. Maybe I just haven't noticed in the past. Maybe it just wasn't that interesting before, but it is now. CBS Sports put out a list of the top 25 college football coaches, and it's okay. No, it needs a reboot. I can fix it. Right? I can scratch out and erase. And do we still have whiteout, or is that against the law now? Remember that stuff? Remember catching a buzz in typing class with whiteout? So wipe out some of them. They need to be replaced. It just the list is okay. It just needs a reboot. It needs a different look. It needs a few different variations. You can't just sit back, and I know people love to do it, but sit back and say, well, here are the best 25 college coaches. No. There's got to be context. It can't work that way. So let me help this thing along, and feel free to disagree all you want. You have to break it down. This is the Jeff Ward way of doing this, because I think it's just, Nick Saban's a great coach. Just stop there? No. You've got to be able to take coaches in other programs and view them on what they're doing with what they have. Comparing life at Texas, coaching at Texas, to coaching at Kansas is not fair. It's not. You can't apply the same standards. You really can't. Money is candy at Texas. It's not at Kansas. So it needs to be broken down, I think, by categories. So I'll do that, of course. Here's the way to look at it. And this is the way I think you have to look at, if you want to fairly judge and compare coaches in the NFL or in college football, you have to do it this way, I think. There are guys that I think are program builders. There's one that I think might be the best. Program builders. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, in my terms, a program builder would be these guys, and you can see them do it over and over again. They can go from place to place and take a program that is down, or in some cases, virtually non-existent. They can pick it up, make it meaningful. Not saying that it's going to be Alabama, but make it meaningful. Then they'll go to another place. You'll look up and go, wow, they picked that one up too. In some cases, in one particular case, the guy's done it twice, in my opinion, at the same school. So when I think you have to look at this list, CBS's list, there's program builders. Then I think there are those that do more with little. What I think it's completely ridiculous not to acknowledge great coaching jobs. Again, comparing someone at Utah versus someone at Texas or Alabama, it's not accurate. It's not fair. You're not applying the same rules. So I think there are those that you have to admire, those that you have to put on a list that do more with little. What's happened at Kansas is remarkable. How can you turn around and say, well, that must mean the coach at Texas, who's barely above 500, must be a better coach? That's not fair at all. The guy in Kansas took up a intramural program and made it meaningful. Then there are those, because I think it's ridiculous not to acknowledge this part of it. So there are program builders. There are those that do more with little. And then, of course, there are those that do little with more. The places that have a bunch of money and have all the built-in advantages. See, college football, as much as coaches try to sell you on this, because they're kind of crybabies overall, they're super powerful, they're unaccountable, so they get away with saying a lot of stuff. Don't let them tell you there is parity. That's garbage. No, there's not. There's parity in the NFL. In the NFL, you're 2 injuries away from being middle of the pack. There's always the margin of error in the NFL is razor thin. Most of your games in college football, you have, and you're a powerhouse, you have all the built-in advantages, all of them. In some cases, probably 5 or 6 out of the 12 games you'll play in a season, if not more, you have built-in advantages. There is not parity. You're not in the same space. It's ridiculous to try to sell the concept. These coaches do it all the time. Sell you on this concept that, well, the game is so level now. No, it's not level at all. The Texas shoe budget is bigger than most college football programs. Their helmet, they have $10,000 lockers. You're trying to tell me that it's all a level playing field? It's not. So then you have to look at those that do little with more. Okay, how's that for a setup? So CBS does it this way. Of course, the top 25, blah, 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 of course, goes Nick Saban, Kirby Smart at Georgia, Dabo Swinney at Clemson, Lincoln Riley at USC. You know, that's the team that just lost to Tulane. Yes. Lincoln Riley at USC, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, Brian Kelly at LSU, Kyle Whittingham at Utah, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, James Franklin, Penn State, Sonny Dykes at TCU. And I don't think people, yes, you now know what Sonny Dykes has done at TCU. They play for a championship. I know they got their face kicked in, but they played for a championship. He won 9 games at SMU the year before. Sonny Dykes at TCU, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State, Chip Kelly at UCLA, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, Dave Clawson at Wake Forest, Josh Heupel, Tennessee, Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. And did I mention doing less with more? How about that mullet? Mark Stoops at Kentucky is 18. Mike Norvell at Florida State is 19. Number 20 is Jimbo Fisher. Okay, sure. Number 21 is Brett Bielema at Illinois. Mac Brown is number 22. He's going to come up more than once. Lance Leipold at Kansas. PJ Fleck at Minnesota. He's 24. And Dave Doran at North Carolina State. Blah, 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 blah. Many of those you haven't heard of. In that regard, good job by CBS for acknowledging some of these guys. You know, you're winning at Wake Forest is not exactly like winning at Texas. So those that are program builders, and I think these guys are pretty fascinating. They're going to be older typically. They've been around, but they have bounced from place to place and taken something that's not very good, in some cases completely non-existent, and made it relevant. Very relevant. Program builders, Nick Saban. That's not Nick Saban because he keeps winning championships at Alabama. It's Nick Saban because he did it at Michigan State. He then goes to LSU. They win a championship. He then goes to Alabama, and they win a bunch of them. Yeah, I think he appears to have, and I'm not saying lost it as in he's mentally he's losing it. I just think that it's gotten a little stale, which is what happens when you make that kind of money and you've been that successful. I do think it's a little stale right now, but that can't deny, as a program builder, everywhere the guy has been, except in the NFL. See, it is that much harder to coach in the NFL. It just is. You can't take Nick Saban, who made Michigan State relevant, really relevant, again, for the first time in a long time. Then goes to LSU, they win a championship in no time. Then goes to the Dolphins, and they can't do anything. He's not an idiot. They couldn't do anything. Then back to Alabama, and look at the rest of his history. No doubt, he's one of the best, if not the best, program builders. And I tell you, the guy who doesn't get credit for this is Jim Harbaugh. What people are lost on is, well, you think they've sort of underachieved at Michigan. They turn around and get beat by TCU, Michigan. Do you stop to think what he did before that? What he did at Stanford was unbelievable. What did they win, 10 games in a season at Stanford? He did it at San Diego or San Diego State? He was at some other I think it was San Diego. He was winning there. And oh, by the way, he took the 49ers to the Super Bowl within an eyelash of winning the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick. So he's bounced from place to place to place. And every time you look up, over time, they're much better. Okay? In fairness, he belongs in that category of program builders. Brian Kelly belongs in the category of program builders. Now, he's at LSU now, and I think he's going to end up doing fine there because he's got all the built-in advantages. But he did it at Cincinnati. He took it as far as he could at Notre Dame. I mean, he kept getting in championship games, and they kept getting crushed because they just don't have the talent. Cincinnati, Notre Dame, and he'll do it at LSU. Okay? Is he building big programs? No, I mean, he didn't pick up a program off the floor, but still, I mean, he's done it in multiple places. Mac Brown. Mac Brown doesn't get the credit for the other stuff because it's slightly overshadowed by a championship at Texas and then getting fired at Texas. He took Tulane from nowhere to something. He then gets hired away to North Carolina. They started off with a 1-win season. Before he came to Texas, he's putting all sorts of players in the NFL draft and winning, what did they win, 11, I think, 10 or 11? Before he comes to Texas, he builds up North Carolina from nothing, a basketball school to something. Comes to Texas, wins a championship, gets fired the year he wins 8 games. Guess what he does? Goes back to North Carolina and picks it up off the floor again. They're good again. He's putting players in the NFL again. It was a brilliant move to get him. Do I think he should have been fired at Texas? Yeah, probably. I said it at the time. It's just stale. You make enough money, you live in a country, you're just in a country club environment long enough, it just starts to get a little stale. Was it all his fault? Not really. In hindsight, you would say, gosh, you would take those kind of seasons again, but it did slip. It did, no doubt about it. He's one of the best program builders there are. No doubt. In fact, if you had a mediocre program tomorrow and you said, man, I need somebody to come be the CEO and turn this thing around and create these models and build this operation, he and Saban would probably be two of the guys you'd say, I'm going to turn it over to you. Next thing you know, in 2 or 3 years, you're good. They just want to fix them. Then there's that category of those that do more with little. It's not exactly Kansas, but these programs have all found a way to do it. They're not Texas. They're not Alabama. Money is not candy where these guys are coaching. Kyle Whittingham at Utah, arguably maybe the best coach there is in the game for what he does and where he is and how they play and how consistent they are. They play a really good brand of football. He puts guys in the NFL. You don't hear about him much, and it's not exactly like he's surrounded by a bunch of blue-chip high school players. This guy's a really, really good coach. I'm not quite sure I understand why he hasn't left. I don't get it. But maybe he just wants to stay there. So Kyle Whittingham at Utah might be, if you're going to do one of those things where you say pound for pound the best coach, it might be him. Sonny Dykes at TCU, doing more with little, you think? Really? They played in a championship game. He goes from SMU to TCU and he's in a championship game. I think that pretty much solves that. Chris Kleiman coaches at Kansas State. He came from some Dakota school, I believe. They won the Big 12 championship, stopping TCU about, a foot short or whatever. Either way, you're Kansas State that was left for dead. That was going nowhere fast until this guy took over. He might have the best quarterback in the league next year. He has done a remarkable job. I would even say Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss does more with little. I know he's a big name and he's high profile and he's flamed out a few times, but it's a pretty impressive run that he's on. Mark Stoops at Kentucky does more with little. Lance Leipold at Kansas does more with nothing. He's at Kansas. Got it? Kansas. The Texas locker room budget is more than the Kansas football budget. And I don't mean locker rooms. I mean the lockers with the little helmet warmers and the videos and the $8,000 screens that are on the mahogany that's on the lockers. What this guy has done at Kansas, the fact that they even matter at all, that you look up and see highlights of Kansas is a miracle. It's ridiculous what he's done. They should have ended football. Should have just ended it. Then there are those... maybe the easiest part of all this stuff. Then there are those that do very little with a lot more. Come on. And you know the two that stand out. You know one that stands out for sure. And I think there's two that stand out right now, right here. Two that do little with more. Little with more. Think about it. They happen to both be in the state of Texas. They happen to both be flagship university. They both happen to be really rich and expensive, and they're just not very good. That would be your man, Jimbo Fisher, $100 million man, Jimbo Fisher. You know, the guy that won 2 league games last year? I don't know. Give Lance Leipold at Kansas, Jimbo Fisher's team, and see what happens. You think they're going to win 2? It's Jimbo Fisher and it's Steve Sarkisian. Now, people love to bet that Steve Sarkisian makes it out of this kind of level of mediocrity. And maybe he does, but as of right now, the body of work says the guy's just over 500. He's at a 100. Jimbo Fisher has a $100 million deal, won 2 league games, by the way, a giant budget, and he had 2 SEC wins. Steve Sarkisian is coaching at a program that has the most money in the game. No one's even close. It's everything you'd ever want. The NFL is a step down to the Texas program. It's the most money in the game. He had Bijan Robinson. It's a pampered life, and he's barely above 500. Now, is it all his fault? No, the guys before him screwed up too. There have been plenty of screw-ups. There have been plenty of coaches who have been sucked into the country club vortex that is Texas football, and that's what they do. They do little with more. So far, it's the same. Both he and Jimbo Fisher they are at the top of the charts of doing little with more. I mean, this is you're gonna punch me in the nose. I'm going to say Nick Saban here, just on 1 year. Look, last year, they had 10 draft picks, 2 of them in the first 3 in the draft, the best quarterback in the game, and he was lucky to win in Austin after getting 17 penalties. They couldn't even win their league or get to a Final Four with 10 draft picks, including the first pick in the draft and the best quarterback of the past 5 years. Are you kidding? No, Joe Burrow is. Forget that. A really good quarterback. It was Nick Saban was guilty. I'm sorry. Last year was guilty of doing little with more. I mean, a lot more. They were loaded with talent and kept screwing it up. Chip Kelly at UCLA belongs on that list. And I don't know why you suck at UCLA. That seems pretty hard to do to me. I know previous coaches haven't done a very good job. I know they keep going through this grinder of coaches, but what has Chip Kelly done since he was at Oregon? What would that be? And it's not like he's been getting bad jobs. He coaches the Eagles, and then he goes to UCLA. It's not exactly a terrible gig. And he's had time. Like I said, Mac Brown can go to a place in 2 years. You look up, and all of a sudden they're winning like crazy. I mean, Chip Kelly's been at UCLA several years. Nah. Flame out with the Eagles, and not much at all at talent-rich and rich UCLA. It's doing little with more. There, that's how you break them down, I think. I think that's a fair way to break them down. You can't just say, well, he's the best coach in the game. You got to always put some context to it. Measuring a coach at A&M or measuring a coach at Texas or measuring a coach at Georgia is not the same as measuring a coach at Kansas State, or Utah. It's not the same game. It's not the same world. They're not the same advantages and disadvantages. And anytime any coach ever whines and says there's such parity in this game, just remember Ward said shut up.